So, by the end of this topic, the learning outcomes is number 1, discuss the different perspective of each theory. 2, know the person who found behind of each theory. 3, gather more ideas regarding this topic and also to be knowledgeable enough on all of this theory. So, number 2, topic. The classical theories of crime causation. This is scientific methods to study the nature, extent, cause and control of crime. In this context, the topic at hand intends to cover one of the 4 aspects of criminological studies, that is the cause of crime. One is the rational choice theory. Rational choice theory is based on the fundamental tenets of classical criminology, which hold the people freely choose their behavior and are motivated by the avoidance of pain and the pursuit of pleasure. Individuals evaluate their choice of action in accordance with each option's ability to produce advantage, pleasure, and happiness. Rational choice provides a micro perspective on why individuals offenders decide to commit specific crimes. People choose to engage in crime because it can be rewarding, easy, satisfying, and fun. The central premise of this theory is that people are rational beings whose behavior can be controlled or modified by a fear of punishment. In this way, it is believed offenders can be persuaded to desist from offending by intensifying their fear and punishment. In terms of setting the quantum of punishment according to this theory, sanctions should be limited to what is necessary to deter people from choosing crime. So, the person involved of this theory is Sigel and McCormick 2016. The rational choice theory. Under parts is A. Routine activity theory. Routine activity theory is based on the assumption that crime can be committed by anyone who has the opportunity. So, in this case, the person who have the opportunity can be committed a crime. In short, the theory also states that victims are given choice on whether to be victims, mainly by not placing themselves in situations where a crime can be committed against them. Routine activity theory is commonly used to explain why and how youth are at heightened risk of being involved in offending behavior of being victimized. So the persons involved in this routine activity theory is Cohens and Filson in 1979. B is lifestyle theory. The lifestyle theory holds that crime is a developmental process guided by an ongoing interaction between 3 variables: incentive, opportunity, and choice. During each phase of criminal lifestyle, initiation, transition, maintenance, burnout, maturity, incentive, opportunity, and choice take on different values and meanings. Experiential fear serves as the incentive for the initiation phase of criminal lifestyles. Once initiated, the incentive for continued lifestyle involvement becomes a fear of losing out of the benefits of crime. By the time the individual enters the 3rd phase of criminal lifestyle, incentive has changed once again, this time to fear of change, which the advent of the burnout maturity phase of the criminal lifestyle incentive has changed it again, this time to fear of death, disability, or incarceration. Lifestyle theory suggests that certain people may become the victims of crimes because of their lifestyles and choices. Yes, because now and then, there are lots of people that choose their friends wisely, and some of them are going to strangers that maybe can make them harm and can make their life go into the risky place. For example, someone with a gambling or substance addiction could be as an easy victim by a con artist. The person involved of this one is a Version of one is Hidden Long, Goldfriendson, and Garofalo. General deterrence and specific deterrence theory. General deterrence is a theory in criminal justice which seeks to curb illegal conduct, to deter means, to discourage. Under the theory, the public will avoid committing crimes from fear of the strict consequences. Deterrence prevents future crime by frightening the defendant or the public. The two types of deterrence are specific and general deterrence. Specific deterrence apply to an individual defendant. In the criminal deterrence literature, three elements combine produce an expected cause of punishment: the probability of arrest, the probability of conviction, and the severity of punishment. General deterrence can be defined as the impact of the threat of legal punishment on the public at large. Specific deterrence can be seen as the impact of the actual legal punishment on those who are apprehended. So number D is letter D is victim precipitation theory. According to victim precipitation theory, some people may actually initiate the confrontation that eventually leads to their injury of death. The victim precipitation theory suggests that the characteristics of the victim precipitate the crime. That is, a criminal could single out the victim because the victim is of a certain ethnicity, race, sexual orientation, gender, or gender identity, providing a deeper understanding of a victimization. So, example of this one is a woman may become the target of domestic violence when she increases her job status and her success result in backlash from a jealous spouse or partner. So letter E is incapacitation theory. Incapacitation theory in the context of criminal sentencing philosophy is one of the function of punishment. It involves capital punishment, sending an offender to prison or possibly restricting their freedom in the community to protect society and prevent that person from committing further crimes. The theory in incapacitation assumes that the state has duty to protect the public from future wrong or harm, and that such protection can be afforded through the form of incarceration or incapacitation. So, the next is the psychological theories of crime causation. In psychology, theories are used to provide a model for understanding human thoughts, emotion, and behaviors. Throughout psychology's history, a number of theories have been proposed to explain and predict various aspects of human behavior. As a psychological theory has two key components, it must describe a behavior, it must make prediction about future behaviors. Each theory has helped contributes to our knowledge of the human mind and behavior. Some theories, such as classical conditioning, are still well accepted today. Others, like Freud's theories, have not held up to so well and have mostly been replaced by new stories that better explain human development. So letter E of this number 2 is psychodynamic theory and psychosexual stages of human development. Psychodynamic theory, also known as psychoanalytic psychotherapy, helps clients understand their emotion and unconscious patterns of behavior. By taking through this emotion and behavior with a social worker, clients come to know themselves better and make better decisions for themselves. The psychoanalytic theory of development argues that the notion that interaction among three components, the id, ego, and superego of the mind result in human behavior. The theory emphasizes the role of the unconscious psychological conflict in shaping human behavior and personality. The persons involved is Sigmund Freud, 1856-1939. So the letter B of this number 2 is behavioral theory. Behaviorism, or the behavioral learning theory, is a popular concept that focuses on how students learn. This learning theory states that the behavior are learned from the environment and says that innate or inherited factors have very influence on behavior. A common example of behaviorism is positive reinforcement. This basically consider human nature to be the product of one's environment. An example of behaviorism is when teachers reward their class or certain students with a party or special treat at the end of the week for good behavior throughout the week. So the same concept is used with punishment. Principles of behavioral learning include the role of consequences, reinforcers, punishers, immediacy of consequences, shaping instinction, schedules of reinforcement, maintenance, and the role of antecedents. Person involved is the V.F. Skinner, and the concepts developed by John Watson, later championed by B.F. Skinner, also referred as a behavioral theory. So the letter C of there's number 2 is social learning theory. Social learning theory suggests that social behavior is learned by observing and imitating the behaviors of others, while behavior psychology focuses on how the environment and reinforcement affect behavior. Bandura put forth that individuals can learn behavior through observation. So some of us are kaning we gather or we know some behavior by by observing others. So social learning theory proposed by the Albert Bandura emphasizes the importance of observing, modeling, and imitating the behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reactions of others. Social learning theory considers how both environmental and cognitive factors interact to influence human learning and behavior. Albert Bandura, as the creator of the concept of social learning theory, Bandura proposed 5 essential steps in order to be learning to take place. One is the observation, attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation. So the person involved is the Albert Bandura. So letters D of this number 2 is the cognitive theory. What is the main idea of the cognitive learning theory? That what comes in our mind if we hear the theory. The main assumption of cognitive theory is that thoughts are the primary determinants of emotion and behavior. The cognitive approach of learning believes that the internal mental processes can be scientifically studied. Cognitive theory, an approach to psychology that attempts to explain human behavior by understanding your thoughts process. So cognitive learning theory enhances lifelong learning. Workers can build upon previous ideas and apply new concepts to already existing knowledge. The person is involved is nicer. So E for this number 2 is moral development theory. Moral development is a theory that focuses on how children develop morality and moral reasoning. Colbert's theory suggests that moral development occurs in a series of 6 stages. This theory also suggests that moral logic informally focuses on seeking and maintaining justice. Colbert's defined 3 levels of moral development: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. It also helps children reasoning about morality, their attitude toward moral lapses, and their behavior when faced with moral issues. So in this moral development theory, it will focus on how children develop moral reasoning by understanding their parents or some person that have or make them punish if they commit any lapses. So the person involved of this is the Colbert's theory. So Intergenerational transmission theory. Intergenerational transmission refers to the transfer of individuals' abilities, traits, behaviors, and outcomes from parents to their children. Economists have largely focused on how intergenerational transmission of educational attainment, earnings and income, wealth, fertility, decision, and welfare receive. The intergenerational transmission of antisocial and criminal behavior is not limited to high crime families. Simply having a parent with a history of antisocial behavior or offending increases the risk of antisocial behavior or offending in offspring across the life's course. So G of this number 2 is alternative theory. Alternative development is an approach aimed at reducing the vulnerabilities that lead to involvement in the illicit crop cultivation and ultimately eliminating such cultivation. A set of statement or principle devised to explain a group of facts or phenomena, especially one that have been repeatedly tested or widely accepted and can be used to make prediction about natural phenomena. Person involved is Friedrich, developed by Friedrich. So the H of this number 2 is differential association, reinforcement theory. The differential association is a theory proposed by Sutherland in 1939. It explained that people learn to become offenders from their environment. Through interaction with others, individuals learn the values, attitude, methods, and motive for criminal behavior. A person becomes a criminal because of frequent criminal patterns. Differential association in a theory developed by Edwin Sutherland, proposing that through interaction with others, individuals learn the values, attitude, techniques, and motives for criminal behavior. The differential association theory is the most talked about of the learning theories of deviance. So the person involved is Edwin Sutherland in 1939. So I of this number 2 is Eysenck's conditioning theory, or criminal personality suggests that personality is a biological base and that personality traits include dimensions of extraversion and neuroticism that can be measured using a personality questionnaire. Eysenck theory argues strongly that biological predisposition towards certain personality traits combined with conditioning and socialization during childhood in order to create our personality. This interactionist approach may therefore be much more valid than either a biological or environmental theory alone. The person involved is Hans Eysenck. So the G of this number 2 is integrated theory. The integrated theories of crime represent an attempt to bridge the ideological differences that exist among various older theories of crime, integrating variables from disparate theoretical approaches. Theory integration is a way to recognize commonalities in the theory to make a synthesis of the theories in order to have a single theory that is superior to any of those individual theories. So, conceptual integration and propositional integration are the two main ways of theory integration. So, person involved is Delbert Elliott, 1979, and Agathon Cantor. Elliott, Agathon, and Cantor, 1979. So, the last topic of this number 2 is the key maternal deprivation and attachment theory. Bowie's maternal deprivation hypothesis suggests that continual disruption of the attachment between infant and primary caregiver, example is a mother, could result in long-term cognitive, social, and emotional difficulties for that infant. Bowley's original belief that the effects to be permanent of irreversible deprivation of attachment refers to the occurrence of the infant's inability to form an emotional attachment to their mother or permanent mother substitute. Person involved of this theory is Bowles. So number 3, Sociological theories of crime causation. This entry focuses on the three major sociological theories of crime delinquency: strain, social learning, and control theories. It then briefly describes several other important theories of crime. So A is social disorganization theory. Social disorganization theory has played a central role in illuminating the neighborhood structures and processes that influence crime and disorder. It has also informed community crime prevention programs and initiatives concerned with the social organization of urban neighborhoods. Social problems leading to social disorganization. Social problems and forces such as a revolution, social upheaval, a class struggle, a financial or economic crisis, a war between nation, mental illness, and political corruption threaten the welfare of the society. Social disorganization perspective, poverty, residential mobility, and racial heterogeneity, and variables from the subcultures of violence, social control, and opportunity to perspective are included in this research. Person involved in this one is Shaw and McHaste. B is concentric zone theory, a theory of urban land use patterns developed by William Burgess. It also states that a city will assume the form of five concentric urban zone: the central business district, the zone in transition, the zone of working person homes, and the zone of beta residences, and the computer zone. This model is an ideal type. However, geographers and economists subsequently propose more complex diagram of urban structures and typologies of the natural areas, aided by the advent of large data sets and computer technology. This social area analysis largely ignores the wider issues of social process structures with concern Burgess and his colleagues in their distinctive contribution to the development of urban sociology. Person involved is William Burgess and Ernest Burgess. Anomy theory. Merton's anomy theory is the most people strive to achieve cultural recognized goals. A state of anomy develops when access to these goals is blocked to entire groups of people or individuals. The result is a deviant behavior characterized by rebellion, ritualization, innovation, and conformity. In criminology, the idea of anomy is that so the letter C of this number 3 is anomy theory. So Merton's anomy theory is that most people strive to achieve culturally recognized goals. A state of anomy develops when access to these goals is blocked to entire groups of people or individuals. The result is a deviant behavior characteristics by rebellion, ritualism, innovation, and conformity. And also, in criminology, the idea of anomy is that a person chooses criminal activity because the individual believes that there is no reason not to. In other words, the person is alienated, feels worthless, and that their efforts to try achieve anything else are fruitless. So the person involved this one is Merton. Letter D, the strain theory. So in sociology and criminology, strain theory states that the social structures within society may pressure citizens to commit crime. Strain theory states that certain strains or stressors increase likelihood of crime. This strain lead to negative emotions such as frustration and anger. Crime may be used to reduce or escape from strain, seek revenge against the source of strains or related targets, or elevated negative emotion. So for example of this one is people who use illegal drugs to make themselves feel better, or students assaulting his peers to end the harassment they cause. So Robert K. Milton is the 1938 the person involved is this one. So the letter E is relative deprivation theory. So relative deprivation theory refers to inequality, that idea that people are deprived compared with others in society. Left realists suggest that this, alongside marginalization and subculture, is a significant cause of crime. So a person involved with one is Aaron Seaman. So let's go for general strength theory. GST or general strength theory is a theory of criminality developed by Robert Agnew. So that Robert Agnew is the person involved with this one. So this theory has gained a significant amount of academic attention since being developed in 1992. Agnew also strength considered to be a solid theory has accumulated a significant amount of empirical evidence and has also expanded its primary scope by offering explanation of phenomena outside of criminal behavior. So letter G is a cultural deviance theory. So it suggests that conformity to the prevailing cultural norms of lower class society causes crime. So the mix of cultures and values created a smaller society with different ideas of deviance, and those values and ideas were transferred from generation to generation. So Clifford Shaw and Henry Mark is the person involved of this. So letter H is a delinquent subculture theory. So in these terms, criminal or delinquent subculture denote system of norms, values, or interests that support criminal or delinquent behavior. So the norms, values, or interests of these subcultures may support particular criminal acts as limited set of such acts. So Howard and Olin, and Dokim and Merton is the person involved of this one. So letter I is a differential opportunity theory. So in this theory, which is the idea that people from low socioeconomic backgrounds who have few opportunities for success will use any means at their disposal to achieve success. The means are generally referred to as subcultures. The theory of differential opportunities combine learning, subcultures, anomy, and social disorganization theories and expand them to exclude the recognition that for criminal behavior there must also be access to illegitimate means. So Richard Cloward and Lloyd Holland is the person who proposed this one. So let's go for letter G, the drift theory. So in this drift theory, recognize that juvenile delinquent hold conventional values and attitude. They are aware of their delinquent action are viewed by society as deviant. So the neutralization and drift theory proposes that juveniles sense an obligation to the law. This obligation to the law remains in place most of the time. So however, when this obligation is strained, juvenile delinquents tend to drift into crime. This trend is best explained by Skiles and Matza's example of justified theft. So person involved is Alfred Wegener. So letter K, so differential association theory. So the differential association theory is for me is the most talked about for of the learning theories of deviance. So abnormal distribution of personality association, especially a theory in criminal sociology, continuous contact with criminals is chief responsible for the development of criminal behavior in the individuals. So this was the Edwin Sutherland is a person involved. So letter L is containment theory. So this theory contains that a series of external social factors and internal qualities effectively insulate certain individuals from criminal involvement even when ecological variables induce others to engage in crime. So for example of this one is a push into a delinquency of crime might be a low level of frustration tolerance, rebelliousness, the need for gratification, as well wants and needs. So person about Walter Rickless. So let's go for letter M, sa social band theory. So in this theory of possessed that offending behavior is caused by weakened or broken social bond with law-abiding people and institution. So social bond consists of four elements, which is the attachment, commitment, involvement, and beliefs. And the presence of each element facilitates law-abiding behavior. So social bond also includes social bonding to the school, to the workplace, and to the community. Social bond theory was written by also Miss Traversing, the person involved with this one. So let's go for letter N. It's the social reaction labeling theory. So in this theory that proposes that deviance is socially constructed through reaction instead of reaction. So according to this theory, no behavior is inherently deviant on its own, but it's made deviant based on the reaction of others. Labeling theory states that people come to identify and behave in ways that reflect how others label them. So American sociologist Howard C. Beaker. So last later is a primary and secondary deviance. The primary deviance refers to the violation of norm of rule does not result in the violators being stigmatized as deviant, but secondary deviance refer to a deviant behavior that is a result of being publicly labeled as deviant and treated as an outsider. The person in this one is Edwin Lemart. So the last theory is political social conflict theories of crime causation. So it's an alternative conception of political theories of crime causation is that they are characterized by their emphasis on social conflict and power relationships. Although such theories, as we have seen, may be applied to any form of crime, they have not historically focused on explaining individual criminal behavior, but rather have focused on explaining variation in crime rates, and especially on the differing traits of being labeled as criminal. Insofar as the criminal justice system is seen as an instrument of political control or repression, and politicization of all crime is implied. More narrowly, it is occasionally argued that political crimes as such are especially amenable to explanation by labeling and conflict theories. But the counter-argument is that any theories with an affinity to a political ideology can be invoked to account for political criminality. So, the letter A of this number 6 theory of crime causation is that Marxist criminology. So Marxist criminology is a theory that attempts to explain crime through the prism of Marxism. So Marxist criminology says during the struggle of resources in capitalism, crime emerged as those on the bottom contend for social, political, and economic equality. One of the important contributions of Marxist criminology has been the ways in which it has expanded the study of crime to include crimes of the powerful. Many early attempts to develop Marxist criminological theory focus on crimes committed by the lower classes. So the person involved is that Bonger of 1916, Rucci and Krismer of 1939. So the letter B of this number 6 is conflict theory. So conflict theory is a sociological theory associated with Karl Marx. It seeks to explain political and economic events in terms of an ongoing struggle over finite resources. In this struggle, Marx emphasizes the antagonistic relationship between social classes, in particular the relationship between the owners of capital, which Marx called the bourgeoisie, and the working class, which he calls the proletariat. Conflict theory had a profound influence on 19th and 20th century through and continues to influence political debates of this day. So for example of this is conflict theory describes the relationship between the employers and employee as one of the conflict in which the employees wish to pay as little as possible for employees' labor, while the employees wish to maximize their wages. So the person involved with this is Karl Marx. So let's go for letter C. So social reality of crime. So under this theory of the social reality of crime, crime is held to be a legal definition of human conduct created against the dominant class in political organized society. So crime are in turn applied by the class that has power to shape the enforcement and administration of criminal law. So in the social reality of crime, for example of this one is he concluded that public conception of crime was constructed in the political arena to serve political purposes. So that the person involved with this one is that Richard Kinney. So let's go for letter D, which is the left realism. So realism is just one political ideology that focuses on the causes of crime and deviance. So left realists believe that living is a capitalistic society, as in a society where private entities control trade and industry instead of the state, is the main cause of crime. Left realism emerged in criminology from critical criminology as reaction against that was perceived to be the left failure to take a practical interest in everyday crime. So it is also accused of downplaying the level of consequences of crime as irrational, fears and or moral panics, while simplistically portraying criminal offenders as the innocent victims of the corrupt state and criminal justice system. Person of one of this Lee Young 1984 and Young 1997. So letter E of this one is postmodern theory. So in this postmodernism is associated with relativism and a focus on ideology in the maintenance of economic and political power. So postmodernists are generically skeptical of explanation which claim to be valid for all groups, culture, tradition, or race. races, and describe truth as relative. As much as modern criminology is rejection of the classical concept of morality and free will, postmodern criminology is a rejection of modern criminology adherence to reason, rationality, and the scientific process as meant to understand of crime. So this is the person involved. So let's go for letter F, which is the constitutive theory. So the constitutive theory states that recognition of an entity as a state is not automatic. A state is only a state when it is recognized as such, and other states have considerable discretion to recognize or not. So moreover of these topics, that only upon recognition by those other states does the new state exist, at least in legal sense. So according to this theory, for states to be considered as an international person, it recognition by the existing states as a sovereign required. So this theory of the view that only after recognition a state gets the status of an international person and becomes a subject to impersonal law. So that is the institutive and constitutive theory. So the person involved is Stuart Hendries. So let's go for letter G. It is a conservatism and liberalism theory. So it's a conservatism is a type of political belief that occurs emphasis on tradition and relies on the individual to maintain society. The term is associated with right-wing politics. It has been used to describe a wide range of view. Liberalism, political doctrine that take protecting and enhancing the freedom of the individuals to be the central problems of politics. So the person with one of this one is Burke in 19th century. So letter H is radicalism. So radical theories tend to view criminal law as an instrument by which the powerful and affluent coerce the poor into patterns of behavior that preserve the status quo. One such view, the so-called peacemaking theory, is based on the premise that violence creates violence. So that is the person involved, Justus von Liebig, Friedrich Wu, and Augustin Laurent around 1830. So the last letter of this number 6, or this last number of crime causation, theories of crime causation, is that identity fusion theory. So identity fusion theory possesses that a strongly fused individual feel kin-like bonds with other group members, even ones with whom they may have had little or no contact. Several studies have garnered empirical support for the rational ties principle. Specifically, cultural fusion theory describe how newcomers acclimate into the dominant culture and maintain aspects of the minority culture, while at the same time the dominance or host culture also focuses aspects of newcomers' culture in the dominant culture to create a fused intercultural identity. So person involved with this one is British social psychologist Henry Tals and his colleagues in the early 1970s. So that is my video presentation in different theories of crime causation. Thank you. So the number 4 is that economic theories of crime causation. So A is economic model of criminal behavior, basic theory. So the economic theory of criminal behavior is an application of the neoclassical theory of demand formalized by Nobel laureate Gary Becker in 1968. It states that potential criminals are economically rational and respond significantly to the deterring incentives by the criminal justice system. An economic model is a simplified version of reality that allows us to observe, understand, and make prediction about economic behavior. The purpose of a model is to take a complex, real-world situation and pare it down to the essentials. Sometimes economists use the term theory instead of model. So the person involved with this is Nobel laureate Gary Becker in 1968. So letter B is Karl Marx theory. Marxism is a social, political, and economic theory originated by Karl Marx, which focuses on the struggle between capitalists and the working class. He believed that this conflict would ultimately lead to a revolution in which the working class would overthrow the capitalist class and seize control of the economy. Marx's most popular theory was historical materialism, arguing that history is the result of material conditions rather than ideas. He believed that religion, morality, social structures, and other things are all rooted in economics. In his later life, he was more tolerant of religion. So, person involved is Karl Marx, and for the letter C of this number 4 is Friedrich Engels and Wilhelm Bunger's theory. So Engels and Marx wrote and published many articles and books together that attempt to expose the uneven distribution of wealth gained during the Industrial Revolution. Their writings see capitalism as an exploitative system that benefits the owners of land, capital, and means of production more than the workforce. That's criminologist William Burger, who believed in a causal link between crime and economic and social condition. He asserted that crime is a social in origin and normal response to prevailing cultural conditions. So in this theory, the evolution involved is William Burgers and Engels and Marx. So let's go. It's all for number 4. So let's go for number 5, which is the biopsychosocial theories of crime causation. So in this crime causation is that biosocial criminology and psychology is a multidisciplinary perspective that attempts to understand criminal behavior by considering the interaction between biological. Example is the genetics and hormones, physiology, brain structure, and functioning. The biopsychosocial model states that health and illness are determined by the dynamic interaction between biological, psychological, and social factors. Engel that state that interaction between biological, psychological, and social factors determine the cause, manifestation, and outcomes, illness, and disease. So, a person involved of this one is George Engel in 1977. So, letter B of this number 5 is moral insanity and criminal responsibility. The term moral insanity, so what comes in our mind if we hear the moral insanity? It was introduced by Pritchard to describe a madness consisting of morbid perversion of the natural feelings, affection, inclination, temper, habits, moral disposition, and natural impulses, without any remarkable disorder or defect of the interest or knowing the reasoning faculties. Generally speaking, criminal insanity is understood as a mental defect or disease that make it impossible for a defendant to understand their action, or to basically to understand that their action are wrong. So defendant found to be criminally insane can assert an insanity defense. So criminal responsibility means accountability for one's action to the criminal law. As criminal responsibility is purely legal question, so insanity is a medical one which must be answered by the physician. So the person involved of this letter B of number 5 is James Cloud Pritchard. Let's go for letter C, which is the premenstrual syndrome, or we call the premenstrual. So premenstrual syndrome must be effective as an affirmative defense to a criminal charge if the defendant can show that was suffering from premenstrual syndrome at the time the crime was committed. So in this causation or theories, so it is the basis if the person is suffering from premenstrual syndrome. It can make that it can have an excuses or something. So premenstrual syndrome has been successfully pleaded as criminal defense in Great Britain. So in Great Britain now, it has a defense but has not existed in American criminal courts. So premenstrual syndrome has been successfully pleaded. So it may not be possible, however, because of the increase of behavioral, physiological, and sociological studies precisely characterizing premenstrual syndrome and elucidating the necessary criteria for its occurrence. Diagnosis for the appropriate defendant to assert this defense is an American court. So this is the premenstrual syndrome. So the person involved of this one is James L. W. Lewis. So let's go for letter D. The letter D is a battered child syndrome, or battered child syndrome, or it's defined as the collection of injuries sustained by a child as a result of repeated mistreatment or beating. So this will be the it will be the case if you hurt some children, or low age or minor de edad. So if a child injuries indicate intentional trauma or appear to be more severe than could reasonably be expected to result from an accident, battered child syndrome should be suspected. Specific is a trigger events that occur just before many fatal parental assault on infants and young children include an infant's inconsolable crying, feeding difficulties, a toddler's failed toilet training, and exaggerated parental perception of acts and disobedience by the child. So person involved of this one is Lee Goldman. So letter E of this is battered woman syndrome. Also, let's go for the woman empowerment, or it is very close in BAUSI, which is the violence against women and children. So in this case, the woman was raising the defense of BEWS, or the battered woman syndrome. Thus, the Supreme Court defined a battered woman as a woman who is repeatedly subjected to any forceful physical or psychological behavior by a man in order to coerce her to do something he wants her to do without concern for her rights. Battered woman syndrome or battered person syndrome is a psychological condition that can develop when a person experiences abuse, usually at the hands of an intimate partner. So people who find themselves in an abusive relationship often do not feel safe or happy. As a result of 1990 Supreme Court of Canada decision, battered woman syndrome is now accepted as legitimate extension of self-defense in Canadian courts. So person involved with this one is the O.W. Barnett. So the last letter of this number 5 is postpartum stress syndrome and postpartum psychosis. So what comes on our mind if we hear this word? So postpartum depression may be mistaken for baby blues at birth, but the signs and symptoms are more intense and last longer and may eventually interfere with your ability to care for your baby and handle other daily tasks. Symptoms usually develop within the first few weeks after the giving birth, with postpartum psychosis, a rare condition that typically develops within the first week after delivery. The signs and symptoms are severe. Signs and symptoms may include confusion and disorientation, obsessive thoughts about your baby, hallucination and delusion, sleep disturbance, excessive energy and agitation, paranoia, attempts to harm yourselves or baby. So that's all for the number 5.